Welcome to the Legit Football NFL podcast. Brian McFadden here, co-founder of Legit Football. We're live on YouTube, as we are every Monday and Friday. It is Monday, March 20th, 2023. Free agency still going on. We had two signings that happened right before we went live. Going to have a really fun main topic today. Let's do the winners, losers of free agency, but by division. So we want to break it down a little bit more. Joining me as he always does, my partner in prime, Kevin Phillip Fox.
What's poppin'? How we doing, guys?
I just like to let it set the tone, right?
Let
just
it
sets
ride.
the vibe.
I like it. My walk-in music's very funky. It's very groovy. I can dig that. You know, I could dig that.
Well, the fact that we bring you in as the regular co-host first, that's a good music to kind of get us all in the mood, perfect. I would say.
So it sets the tone. You're exactly right. I'm a tone setter. You know, I'm a locker room guy. You know,
you're here for the culture. You're here. You know,
I'm a culture guy. You already know.
You're the Jamal Williams of the Legit Football NFL podcast.
You could not have given me a better compliment to start my week off, Brian. I'm so thankful that you said that.
Now, if you can somehow simultaneously switch from like bawling your eyes out to like super motivated, then we'll really hit the Jamal note.
Stay tuned.
I mentioned as soon as we went live, two more signings just came in. So the bulk of free agency, Kevin, is done, but there's still people being signed. There's still some pretty high note free agents still available. So what we're going to do today is the legit headlines are basically just signings, right? We're going to go over a few of the signings, and then we're going to go ahead and decide who we think are the winners and losers from each division. We're going to have one person representing each division. So we know we got to have more. It's not just going to be the two of us.
Yeah.
Another repeat champion, Greg Silver, back with us, host of the Screaming from the Sidelines podcast.
There he is. Okay.
Feeling the groove. So Kevin's got like the low down, lo-fi, just chill, a little funk, little 70s. Greg is like gets the place popping, right? So it's two different themes.
A little hip hop action.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk over the music. I kind of just wanted to do it justice and let it ride out so I could just embrace it. Anthony, wonderful job. I'm honored to have that track.
I'm a little jealous. I just get like the Legit Football intro music. I don't have any special.
Hey,
of course, that would be
one.
That was all right. True. I guess that would be weird to play the intro and then have my own like walk up music. So I'm fine with that. Guys, so I mentioned we're going to break down winners and losers from each division for our main topic. But before we go into that, let's just break down some of the big headlines, which is essentially some of the top signings throughout this week. Before we even get that, there was a trade. So let's talk about Brandin Cooks to the Cowboys. He's been wanting out from Houston for a while, finally got his wish. Dallas has been looking for that number 2. There was a lot of talk. We talked on this show about being Odell. You know, I'm curious to get your thoughts if that's still going to happen. But Cowboys sent a 2023 fifth rounder as well as a 2024 sixth rounder to the Texans for Cooks. Dallas will end up paying $12 million of Cooks' $18 million salary. Houston's going to eat the other $6 million. Still a viable wide receiver. Caught 53 of 69 passes, nearly 77% catch rate, 550 yards and 3 touchdowns. But this is a guy who, when he has played at least 15 games, he goes over 1,000 yards like clockwork. So, Kevin, thoughts on both sides of this? Both Houston trading him away, getting a 5th and a 6th, and Dallas getting a new number 2 wide receiver.
It definitely feels like a great move for both teams. I think I'm happier about it for Dallas because I think we've been waiting for Dak to have that true 1-2 punch with CeeDee Lamb for a long time. And I feel like this is that. I feel like this is that guy. Like, I like Brandin Cooks. I've always been a huge fan. He definitely has that. I wouldn't necessarily use the term elite, but I would say he's a good to very good wide receiver at his ceiling, and that's definitely
his floor. His floor is 1,000 yards if he plays a full season.
Learned.
It's that.
Yeah. It's so he's so consistent. It almost is baffling that he's been able to manage this level of like you said, the floor is just it's so cozy for a wide receiver too. And who knows if he finds a new ceiling. You know, it's definitely possible that we see a new ceiling for Brandin Cooks in Dallas's offense. The return's not crazy, but knowing that Dallas is eating 2/3 of the contract makes it better. You know, that's definitely not the worst package I've seen from a team receiving like the Amari Cooper trade comes to mind as like maybe the worst compensation I've ever seen for a wide receiver. So, you know, this is at least better than that, I'll say.
he has been traded 4 times now. There was I wish I had the post on Twitter. Somebody actually accumulated all the draft picks that he's been traded for over the years, multiple firsts, because he was traded from the Saints to the Rams for a first, traded to the Patriots for a first, Texans, now Cowboys. Greg, I thought he was like 35 years old. He's only 29. It's just one of those guys. I feel like Brandin Cooks has been in the league forever. Is this the right move for Dallas? Can he be that complimentary number 2 next to CeeDee Lamb?
I'm going to say yes, and Brandin Cooks is an interesting one to me because I think he's been both overrated and underrated during his career. I think he was a little bit overrated when he was on the Patriots and then the Rams, especially Rams. I thought Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp were so underappreciated at that time in the season that they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots. But he also showed on the Texans, this is a guy that can kind of fly under the radar. And you said it, Brian, 1,000 yards is his floor. The Cowboys' weakness last year was Dak, and Dak's weakness was not really having a real guy outside of CD. I know Dalton Schultz, Michael Gallup, those are serviceable players, but
Noah Brown.
Brandin Cooks could be, it's what they need in just terms of reliability. They don't need to have a superstar number 2 wide receiver. If this is the kind of move that can get Dak to be a little bit more comfortable and not have them completely rely on their running game, that still should be the focus of their offense. But if it can get Dak a little bit more superpower and an opportunity for him to thrive when they're losing games and everybody knows they're going to pass, then I do think that this is a signing that on paper should work for the Cowboys, who play in a weaker conference.
So, Kevin, does this put Dallas out of the Odell sweepstakes, or is that still a thing? Because we've been pegging him to Dallas for a while now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I've actually been thinking about that a lot, given the Brandin Cooks trade and Buffalo going out and signing Trent Sherfield this morning. It kind of makes me wonder, did Odell pick a team, and is it not one of those 2 teams? Because I kind of feel like those moves are like almost, they feel a little bit like...
Who would be left? Like the Giants? Like I'm starting to kind of see
Chiefs.
Like a Giants return.
I know the Chiefs were one of those names.
They were one of those names, but
yeah.
Do you see that? I don't see Odell Beckham Jr. going to the Chiefs. Like we said on last show, they won the Super Bowl with Juju as their top receiver.
Yeah, but they'll surprise you. Like, they do what they got to do to stay on top, and that's one of the things that I've respected about them so much. They haven't necessarily shied away from, those flashy big moves. But, it'll be interesting to see because, yeah, Odell to the Giants would be... I'm all for that. I would love that reunion. I think that would up dime stock quite a lot in IRL and in fantasy. So that's something that I support.
Nice. That's what the kids say.
You like that?
IRL. Well done. I got to keep us hip.
Voice of the youth.
We don't have to go on this long, but I kind of like this Odell to the Giants thing, Greg. It almost feels like we started. I know the Giants have said that they're not done. They made the trade for Darren Waller. They're looking to get pieces. We already went over. They tagged Saquon. They signed Daniel Jones to a top 8 quarterback deal. They need to surround him. They just went to the playoffs and won a game. Could we see Odell back where he originally started?
I think 100%, as long as Odell wants that. I mean, that's the big if. But last time I was on the show, I gave a lot of credit to Joe Shane and Brian Daboll for being able to figure out the football things. This team has limitations in terms of football things and their roster. Are they a nightmare to be around? Is the locker room messed up? No, it doesn't appear that way at all. They widely overachieved this season from start to finish, and they won a playoff game on the road. Daniel Jones went from a guy that was pretty much casted out of the league to now signing a big contract. How much money he should have gotten, that's a different discussion. The point being, the Giants seem to be doing things the right way with a realistic sense of what their limitations are, but they can be competitive because they did it this year. A lot of teams that are in rebuild mode start overachieving too early, and the Giants don't necessarily have Super Bowl expectations at this point. But signing a guy like Odell, and they're like, dude, look, we already are good without you. We have a system. We have an identity. Just come help us a little more. I hope his personality could gel in New York. But if we're just going to go on paper, adding a guy like that, assuming he could be 90% of the player he was before the second ACL injury, I like it.
Let's stay with wide receivers. Adam Thielen has a new home. A lot of people were thinking like, oh, that's a Patriots type signing. I can just see him playing for Bill Belichick. But no, goes to Carolina. Pat McAfee broke this, interestingly enough. Contract is worth $25 million over 3 years. $14 million of that is guaranteed. Last year, Thielen caught 70 of 107 targets, 65.4% catch rate, 716 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Still a really solid red zone target, if nothing else. He is 32, two-time Pro Bowler. Kevin, they lost DJ Moore. This is not a like for like, but it's nice to see that they got somebody to boost that wide receiver room in Carolina.
I absolutely love it for the Frank Reich vibe, the number 1 overall pick. They're going to need a guy they can trust, especially in the red zone. I think that's where Adam Thielen is really going to make his late career. You know, he's going into that final, that potentially the twilight of his career, could be the last deal he ever gets. And I think pairing him with a rookie quarterback just makes so much sense. And everybody's pretty much assuming that it's CJ Stroud. So it'll be nice to see how CJ Stroud and Adam Thielen's chemistry and, all that, mesh together, and how he in that offense will bring them some sort of reliability, some sort of a safety blanket type situation. I think it's a great move for Carolina. He got paid, 3 years, $25 million at his age as a wide receiver. Solid contract. So yeah, I think this is going to end up being something that we're going to look back on and say, they knew what they were doing there. That was a nice deal. I think they need a true, like a de facto 1. I think they need an alpha. So I don't think they check that box, but they do check some wide receiver depth and they give Adam Thielen a nice little bag too. So I'm happy with this.
Well, Greg, I was going to mention this specifically, that he has thrived as a number 2 behind Justin Jefferson and behind Stephon Diggs. Prior to that, the other receivers currently on the roster with the Panthers, Terrace Marshall Jr., Laviska Shenault, remember that guy? He's still in the league, and Shi Smith. So as of now, Thielen is that de facto number 1. How much does that affect his ability to produce and contribute with Carolina?
It's give and take, because Carolina is going to have a rookie playing quarterback. So a guy that's experienced and reliable and trusted like Adam Thielen, I think, is going to do a huge service for CJ Stroud or maybe somebody else if they change their mind. That said, you do mention that he's a little bit older. Kevin, you said this is probably the last big contract he's getting in his career. So I don't know if he's necessarily number 1 receiver material. His production was down this year. Kirk Cousins, as much as people like to be hard on Kirk Cousins, myself included, is still a very reliable and smart and just serviceable quarterback. So, I mean, it's that wasn't the issue there. Justin Jefferson's great. The Panthers, they have the 4th worst odds right now to go and win a Super Bowl. So it's going to be a big rebuild. I like the Adam Thielen for the sense of being an asset to a rookie QB. I don't know if I like it in terms of actual division contention.
Yeah, you're right. They're not bringing him in so that they compete in the South this season. Yeah. They're building him, putting him in that roster as a way to mentor some of the young receivers. They're probably going to draft a receiver or 2 to try to develop those guys, and just a nice, reliable security blanket for a rookie quarterback, be it CJ Stroud or someone else. Detroit Lions, Anthony's Lions are hot and still adding pieces. Woo. Greg, they signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who was one of the top-rated free agents, period, but certainly one of the top safeties still on the board. Contract's only for 1 year, but is worth $8 million, which is more than some of these other safeties signed. Most of them signed for around $6 million. That's noteworthy. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson does have ties to Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell from their time in New Orleans. Last year, 67 tackles, 6 interceptions, 8 pass deflections across only 12 games in that great Eagles defense. Thoughts on this signing, Greg?
Well, it's huge, and it's not only huge, it's necessary. And I'm going to say this because everybody loves the Lions, as they should, and they say very positive things about them. But one thing that hasn't necessarily been hammered into the narrative, which I think it should be, is there are now expectations this year. I know it's a franchise that has historically not done great. I know people are rooting for them, and they're kind of America's sweethearts. But guess what? There are expectations. Jared Goff was really good in the second half of the season last year. Hardly turned it over. They kept Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator. Dan Campbell is clearly a player's coach. They have a lot of heart. They knocked off Green Bay, had a winning record after starting 1-6 and going 3-14 the year before, and people thought they might go winless.
We put them in our final power rankings in the top 10, even though they didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. And so my point is there are expectations for this team, and I'm not saying that I'm going to be all harsh about the Lions or like they have to do something great this year, but it's not like last year where, okay, they were 3-14, they should be better this year. Season started terribly, and then the rapid turnaround. There are expectations that if this team does not make the playoffs, they need to be very much in that hunt come Thanksgiving.
Oh, I think they need to make the playoffs, Kevin.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that kind of year, huh? Which is kind of crazy to think about, right? Because they're the Lions, right?
It's nice to have expectations as a Lions fan. I'm sure Anthony will agree. We are going to let Anthony come in for the main topic, so he will get to share his thoughts on Detroit.
Yeah, I think the pendulum has swung just far enough now that I like what Greg said, because I do think, you have to track that, right? Like we talked about it in the pre-show about the Texans, and because I've been a big fan of their offseason so far, and I was kind of a big fan of them down the stretch last year. They turned a lot of heads in the later part of the season. They took KC to overtime. They won the last game of the season. They were competitive in almost every game the last couple months of the season. So I don't think the Texans are this punching bag that we've thought they are. The Lions, they're at that next step. They are no longer punching bags, and they're no longer ascending. They have to be there. Like I think this
ascended.
Is the year. They've ascended. And unfortunately, unlike the Giants, their ascension didn't come with a playoff berth, which, always brings a little extra confidence, always brings a little extra culture boost. But I don't think anybody in that locker room doesn't feel successful after they knocked off Green Bay. And like Greg said, had one of the most historic turnarounds, like from a record standpoint, like ever. 1-6 to, 9-8 to end the season. That's freaking unprecedented. Yeah, I think that's the one caveat to their success is, okay, you were the punching bags, then you were the darlings. Now you have to be legit. Now you have to make the playoffs straight up. Like I like that, Greg. I like that goal for the Lions. I think that's a nice bar for them in this upcoming season.
So one more legit headline to get to, then I want to get to the main topic because I think that'll be fun. But let's stay with the Texans. They just made their left tackle, Laremy Tunsil, once again, it's the second time this has happened for him, the highest paid offensive line in NFL history. 3-year extension worth $75 million with $50 million of it guaranteed. A 3-time Pro Bowler. He allowed only 1 sack on over 1,000 snaps last season. Strong 80 PFF grade. Only 28 years old. And now the highest paid offensive lineman at $25 million per season. Number 2 is Trent Williams at 23. This just is a no-brainer, Greg, but it's like one of those things that just Kevin mentioned the Texans, and we're going to talk about these teams in the division, but they're drafting a quarterback at number 2. Why not lock up your stalwart, one of the best left tackles in the NFL, and make sure you've got protection for him?
Yeah, you said it, and you have to, because the Texans are getting rid of a lot of their veterans and higher paid players. Cowboys are going to eat a lot of that Brandin Cooks contract. Your next quarterback is going to be a rookie. Davis Mills might not even be on the team next year. Is he still there?
Yeah, technically. He's still in a contract.
1 year, 1 or 2.
Okay, yeah. So he's still there. But the point is,
he's got 2 more years. It's a rookie contract, 4 years.
Right.
So he's going into year 3.
Wow.
Oh, he's 4.
Nice backup.
Wow. So, right. And it's not like you're the Bengals where you got to pay Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and make a sacrifice somewhere. You're the Texans. Of course you go and pay your left tackle. Don't leave your rookie quarterback back there stranded with no protection on a bad roster in a team that, in Kevin's words, is a punching bag.
Yeah, they have been. And they weren't down the stretch or at least they were from a record standpoint, but they weren't from a competitive standpoint. They took the Super Bowl champs to OT, that's no joke. And, I actually, it's so funny because I had Twitter beef recently. Me and Zach Miller from Coffee Shop Football, and Reception, we were beefing on Twitter because I was like, we were talking about how we like the Texans towards down the stretch last year, and I saw all their moves. They brought in Jimmy Ward. They brought in Case Keenum, which I think means Mills is expendable. I think they brought in Case Keenum to be the true backup to whoever they draft. I think Davis Mills is on his way out unless they do a 3-headed situation, which I don't. Maybe you could justify that, but D'Amico Ryans is great. They brought in Chase Winovich. Like, I don't know, man. I think the Texans I think they're going to go. I compared them in the pre-show to the Trevor Lawrence year one Jags. Brian astutely pointed out that none of the quarterbacks this year have the buzz or the prospect, level as a Trevor Lawrence, and that's fair. I think I can agree with that. But like we said, it's all about how they turn out, and that's a crapshoot. We won't know. Bryce Young is looking like the pick right now. Who's to say Bryce Young can't go out there and have like a magical, okay, sorry, that was the wrong word. A solid magical. I'm going to throw that out for the Texans. I'm sorry, not this year, but eventually though, with the Dalton Schultz signing, we're going
to get to that. You're listing all the signings.
I'm spoiling it.
You know what? Let's not wait any longer. Let's go ahead and jump into our main topic where we get to break down all of the winners and losers. I love that.
Elite.
It's still a little creepy, but we're going to break down all of the divisions. We're going to pick one winner and one loser from each division. The three of us, plus our producer, Anthony Wayner, come on back from behind the digital glass.
We
will talk about we'll split up the divisions: North, East, West, South, AFC, NFC. If Anthony ever comes in, I invited you in. Anthony gives himself walk-up music.
That's
love
what
it.
I'm talking about.
Hey guys,
what up, dog?
All right, so Kevin, I have given you the AFC East and NFC East.
Yes,
Bills
sir.
fan, you're welcome. Greg is going to cover the AFC West and NFC West. Of course, Anthony gets the NFC North and the AFC North, and I will wrap it up with the AFC South and NFC South. I'm going to ask for a volunteer. Who wants to go first? Who wants to go through their divisions, winner and loser? We won't have you do both, so you can pick which one you want to do. Yeah, go by conference. The AFC won the Super Bowl, so we'll do that. Who wants to go first? Come on, give me a volunteer. It's going to be awkward. Thank you, Greg. Step up to the plate. So let's start with the AFC West. Makes sense. Defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs are in that division. Let's take a winner and a loser from free agency.
I'm going to preface this by saying that it's hard to label clear losers in this division because for two of these four teams, they wildly underachieved last season compared to their expectations. And then for another one of those teams, while they accomplished on paper what people would have expected, their season ended in such a catastrophic fashion that it made for a really sour offseason. So the winner I'm going to pick for the AFC West
Nice.
is the Denver Broncos, and that is simply because you really cannot go downward. Not much farther lower you can go. You can
By
only go
default,
up.
they won because they already were at rock bottom. I like it.
Yes, and they lost a lot of players, but nobody that essential. They signed Mike McGlinchey, Zach Allen, Samaje Perine, and Alex Singleton. So combine that with Sean Payton, a guy who clearly is one of the best coaches in the league and already has that going for him on his resume. And then a bunch of solid players. Like Perine might get some good run because we don't know when Javonte Williams is coming back. So I like it. And look, this doesn't mean that they're a playoff team, but it means they have a chance to be in the playoff bubble. And so much of this, in the end, will depend on what Brian has referred to as the artist formerly known as Russell Wilson.
I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong, especially if he does it again this year. So that's my winner. Are we doing losers too?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, the loser, I don't think this is necessarily.
Oh, I
like
think there's a clear
hardcore-
loser in the AFC West, but yeah.
You think so?
Oh yeah.
Do you think it's the Chargers?
No.
You don't think
here
it's
we
the
go.
Chargers?
No, give your explanation for the Chargers, and then we'll all go around. And anybody have any first counters against the Broncos as the winners in the AFC West for free agency?
no, it makes sense to me.
Okay, all right, good. So defend your Chargers, and then I will have a rebuttal to that.
Okay, I mean, look, they signed Eric Kendricks. They might trade Austin Eckler. The bottom line with this team is the issue isn't free agency. It's having a defense that can win games and a running game that can work. Just anything to take the burden off of Justin Herbert. And I actually, before I let you go, Brian, I do want to say that I'm wearing a Kelsey Plum Aces jersey because that is the true loser in the AFC West. Married Darren Waller recently. Mark Davis owns both the Aces and the Raiders. And then the Raiders go and ship him off to New York, man. I'm feeling for you, Kelsey. The newlywed. That's the true loser of free agency.
Well, that note right there is one of the reasons why I think the Raiders are the loser from the AFC West. You go from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo, which I know isn't a huge jump, but it's a drop in my mind. I don't care if Jimmy G has experience with the Josh McDaniels offense. I think that's a drop. You got rid of Darren Waller for peanuts, essentially, for when he's at his best, a top 3 tight end in the league. You've got the tie with his wife playing for Vegas, and now he has to go across the country and live in New York. You broke that up. What the hell? They haven't really addressed defense. You signed Jacoby Myers, but you already have Hunter Renfrow, and they kind of play the same position and have similar skill sets. I haven't really seen any big upgrades along the offensive line. You franchise tag Josh Jacobs. Great. That was a smart move, but it's like what else were you going to do there at running back? So I just don't see any moves that are exciting. And the moves I do see, downgrade at quarterback, huge downgrade by trading away Darren Waller, who you've been trying to trade away for like 2 years now. So apparently that relationship got sour. That's, to me, clear loser is the Chargers have just been they just haven't done much at all. They've just been kind of neutral, but they were a playoff team. The Raiders, in my opinion, were not a non-playoff team, has actually gone in the opposite direction.
Jimmy and Jacoby, to me, saved the Raiders from being true losers because, whether or not you like Jimmy, whether or not you like Jacoby, I mean, that's at least something that you can look forward to. You can package that and say, look, we got a franchise QB and an elite.
You had a franchise QB. You had a franchise QB. You think about net negatives.
They decided
Am I the only one that thinks that Jimmy was so much better than Carr this last year?
I like Jimmy.
No,
Greg, we've been the resident Jimmy truthers. I don't know what Jimmy did to Brian, but
it's just Jimmy his ceiling. Carr's ceiling is a lot higher than Jimmy Garoppolo. You guys at least have to admit that. 100%. Jimmy has been very much a product of the Shanahan offense. You cannot understate how much that offense does for quarterbacks.
But
it is meant.
Who's to say he won't be that for McDaniels?
Because Josh McDaniels is not Kyle Shanahan. He's just not. He had a chance to run a team in the past in the Broncos. Look how that turned out.
Years in New England as a play
caller. A lot of people have good years in New England. They go elsewhere, they flame out, and then they go back to New England, or they coach at Alabama for a while and then go back to New England.
Those are
one of those paths.
True.
I'm just not excited. You think about net negative. To me, it's certainly not a net positive. You can say what you want about Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe it's neutral. And I like Jacoby Myers, but he's not Darren Waller. So you lose Darren Waller, you gain Jacoby Myers. That's a net negative. You lose Derek Carr, you gain Jimmy Garoppolo. At best, that is an even swap. Yeah. Your defense was one of the worst in the NFL. I haven't seen any major. They got Jerry Tillery, who was decent, in the middle of the defense for the Chargers in the past. But that doesn't get me all that excited. I literally don't see anything else on here that's like, Marcus Epps. Yeah, he started for the Eagles, but he was the worst rated PFF. He was in like the 50s on that Eagles defense.
Yeah,
he's not going to make you better. So to me, the Raiders are an obvious loser in the AFC West.
I would love to ask the group, what has Kansas City done?
By the way, Armand in the chat agrees with me. Raiders are the losers. Thank you, Armand.
What has Kansas City done apart from losing their top receiver from last year and their top offensive lineman? What have they added that keeps them from being the losers?
They still have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I don't care about the rest of it.
Good point.
I get it, but it's like if we're doing free agency though, I mean that's right.
No, but Greg mentioned that certain teams are starting here, certain teams are starting here. I do think that factors in. Okay. The Broncos were starting on the bottom of the pit. The Chiefs, as long as they have that three, the Holy Trinity, if you will, I don't really care. Everybody roasted them for traded Tyreek Hill to my Miami Dolphins. What did they do? They went and won a Super Bowl. It's no, they're not going to be losers as long as those three guys are still kicking.
Period. But I mean, if we're looking at free agency in a vacuum, I mean, to me,
Kevin,
you look at
your question. I took notes on this one. They got Charles Omenihu, Drew Tranquil, and they got Jawan Taylor to a 4-year deal. So nothing that special.
I think a downgrade, but yeah.
No, but Brian's got the right point, which is the Chiefs last year were the only team in that division that had an offseason that set them back. And everyone was like, oh, the Chargers got better. The Raiders got Devontae. The Broncos are going to be good. And they all sucked. The Chargers were the Chargers in the end. and the Chiefs went and won the Super Bowl. So
Chargers
you can't count them at a loss. Like, what do you want me to say about that?
Yeah, and I do want to evaluate in a vacuum, but you have to at least consider what they needed. They didn't need anything.
Yeah.
They really didn't need anything. So
no, in real time, I'm evolving my own answer to this question.
Okay,
I was kind of looking at it super like in a vacuum, like in and out. You know what I'm saying? But I appreciate this nuanced approach of where they're starting from, where they got. It's almost like we're looking at net.
The way I looked at it is how much did a team need to do? Like, I've got the South. We're not going to go into that just yet. Or actually, I will. Let me just jump into the AFC. Let's jump into the AFC South. You were talking about you went on and went down all the signings of the Texans already. But specifically, as I was analyzing each of the roster moves for the teams in the AFC South, you look at the Jaguars. They've done almost nothing. They franchise tag Evan Ingram. They brought in C.J. Beathard. He's still kicking around as a backup quarterback. Cornerback Trey Herndon, decent depth piece. But that's pretty much it. But they didn't need to. They went in, they won a playoff game, they came back against the Chargers, they gave the Chiefs a run for their money. A lot of their guys were signed on multi-year deals. Jawan Taylor is a loss, but I don't think he's not elite. He's just like a nice, solid tackle. So that's my point was I didn't consider them a loser because they didn't need to do that much. But some teams who did need to do much didn't do. So I was looking at the Titans. I thought they should have done. I had trouble rating the Titans. I'm going to go through all four of these quickly and then pick winners and losers. They added Andre Dillard. Tennessee did. Good, but he wasn't good enough to start in Philadelphia. Fine. They had studs at left and right tackle, but he's never really kind of developed there. Arden Key is a nice piece. Good for the Niners. Had a decent season in Jacksonville. But the biggest question here is Derrick Henry's still on the roster and Ryan Tannehill's still on the roster. So it's almost like an incomplete. Like, I don't know what they're planning. I don't know if they're going to tear it all down and get rid of Tannehill and Henry. Are they going to try to be competitive? Where they're not adding pieces to be competitive either. It's like they're on standstill. So I had trouble evaluating them. Then we look at the Colts. They lost Stephon Gilmore. They lost... they didn't capitalize on the number 1 overall pick, so they're stuck at number 4. They've got Gardner Minshew. Oh, okay, that's fine. You can start for if you need to. Samson Ebukam. They signed a kicker to over a $20 million deal in Matt Gay. So there's nothing really. They re-signed Ashton Doolin. There's question about Michael Pittman's long-term longevity, so nothing gets me excited. So I want to start with the loser. I'm going to say the Colts are the loser, if for no other reason in the AFC South that they did not trade up for the number 1 pick with all that Irsay talk about the Alabama kid and all. They are stuck at number 4. They are in all likelihood, because I'm sure Arizona will trade the number 3, be stuck with the 4th best quarterback in this class. And at the end of the day, you're nothing without the quarterback. The Colts know that. Any pushback on my loser, and then I'll get to the winner.
Definitely not.
No.
Okay. Well, the obvious winner is the Houston Texans, Kevin. There's no question. I had them pegged as the winner before the 2 signings. You're going to have a rookie quarterback. You're bringing a new head coach, big culture guy. You get a guy like Robert Woods. Woods is just a workman, right? Yeah. He's not the flashiest, but he's a guy who has shown that he can produce when he's fully healthy. You got him pretty cheap, 2 years, $17 million. Case Keenum, you mentioned, that's a nice, solid backup. I do think he's going to be a better backup choice than Davis Mills. Noah Brown, you mentioned him earlier as a piece that flashed for the Cowboys. He's now on the Texans. They traded for Shaq Mason, a nice, solid guard. They re-signed Laremy Tunsil. We talked about that earlier. Oh, and on top of that, they also brought in Dalton Schultz, who has the potential to be like a top 5, top 6 tight end in the league. Devin Singletary, very nice running back piece to either back up Dameon Pierce or have like a nice complementary. So Jimmy Ward, you mentioned, bringing in some Niners guys. I just like what they did. None of them are like superstars, right? There's no super splashy pick, but they just seem to have a plan. And I think that was my problem, is that Tennessee's plan is unknown and the Colts' plan I don't agree with. So my winner in the AFC South is the Texans, loser, Indianapolis.
I absolutely love that. And yeah, I totally am like, in hindsight, I should have saved my Texans take for this moment because
You started listing all the players. I'm like, no, main
topic. They're just my champion. I can't help it. I want to get on a rooftop and just scream. Like, I love the direction that the Texans are taking, like I feel strongly about it. Like, I think they're a year away from being competitive still. But I think that that's okay when you're at the stage of their development that they're in. I think that this is going to be a year about learning, about getting those battle scars. And, the following year, they're setting themselves up to hopefully be in that ascending, range. But I think right now they're just going to be a good team. So I think, I would say a bad team with good prospects.
For good bad team.
There you go.
A good bad team.
Which
better than a bad good team?
Yeah. Oh, I would definitely rather be
I think they'll be a good bad team. Yeah.
Let's go to Anthony next because I feel like he's just been sitting there hitting his sounds when it's appropriate, but he's on screen, so I want to give him some time to talk. AFC North, Anthony, winner and loser from free agency.
So I do want to start with the winner because this might surprise some people. I'm going to hit my sound.
You don't have to announce you're going to hit your sound. You can just hit the sound,
I love it.
I'm like, looking this way. I don't want you to wonder what I'm doing. So Cleveland actually had the most free agent signings of any team so far. And I think one that sticks out is Dalvin Tomlinson, former Vikings defensive tackle. He was ranked number 34 in interior defensive lineman in pass rush. And he had an 80 PFF grade for the season. And I think how bad the Browns defense was, I think this is a great improvement. And I think that this can really add to the pass rush that they were lacking in 2022. And then they got Juan Thornhill, and he's going to be with Grant Delpit up over in the safety position. And that's a secondary that's just continuing to grow because there's already talent. Now you just have to add depth, and I think that that's important for the entirety of the Browns defense because that's just how bad they were, that you have to make these additions to improve that talent. And then defensive end, I don't know how to say this, Agbonia Okoronkwo? Okoronkwo, okay.
Okoronkwo.
He was signed to replace Jadeveon Clowney, who got released. And then Pochik at center, Takataki to add depth to linebacker, Maurice Hurst and Tristan Hill all to the defense. And they just, all these moves that they've made for the defense, these guys may not be like top 10 Pro Bowl guys, but you're adding depth and they're not old. I mean, none of these guys are 30 yet. I guess you could argue Tomlinson's getting old. He's 28 going 29. So you could argue that might be a flaw there, but I still think that he has some prime left in him. So yeah, I got to say the Cleveland Browns won free agency in the AFC North because of not only the number of guys they signed, but the value in the guys that they signed.
Anybody have I have an alternate take. I can see that, but so you guys have. Okay, Greg, go for it.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Anthony. I think it is what Cleveland needs, and it served them well. But the most interesting signing to me that's gotten like a grade A is Orlando Brown, and that's because their gain was the Chiefs' loss, and those are the two teams that are kind of at the top of the conference. So in that sense, the fact that they helped them and took away from somebody else just kind of makes me have my eye on the Bengals a little bit more.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that because of the difference. Jonah Williams was actually one of the worst rated pass blocking left tackles in the NFL. Then you go to Orlando Brown. Like that's a huge jump where we saw that 2 years in a row now, one of the biggest problems that Cincinnati has had has been protecting Joe Burrow. This guy, well, when he has time with those weapons, have been fantastic. Love that signing. My counter to that specifically, and I wouldn't put them as a loser, but I wouldn't put them as a winner because they did lose some important pieces on the defense. They lost both of their starting tackles. Or starting safeties. I know Jesse Bates was expected, but losing Von Bell as well. We love Captain Lou. Lou Anarumo. He's gonna find a way, but that's something that's gonna be tough. They did draft a safety in the first round last year, but they're still gonna have some pieces to fill there. So I wouldn't put him as a winner, but I love that Orlando Brown signing, so I can't really argue with that. Did you have one, Kevin? Before I give my thought.
No, please, yeah, go ahead.
So these aren't a lot of signings and they don't move the needle, but I kind of like what the Steelers have done. I love Larry Ogunjobi up front on the defensive line. Patrick Peterson, he was flirting with an 80 PFF grade last year. He still showed that he's able to be solid. Isaac Seumalo, they just signed him, who was like just shy of a 70 PFF grade, and that was the lowest on that Eagles offensive line. He's going to instantly upgrade the line. Landon Roberts, who has always been a solid linebacker, formerly the Patriots and the Dolphins, now going with the Steelers. It's not flashy, but I just feel like they made some nice, clean, for a team that was on the brink of the playoffs last year, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
So
Pittsburgh, I kind of feel like, is in one of those positions where until they know about Pickett, they kind of just have to do everything they can to be competitive. They don't have to go all in. I don't think it would be smart for them to go all in, but they can't really sell the team around Pickett short. So I do agree with you, Brian, there, that I do love their signings. Yeah, I was looking at the division just now when Anthony picked Cleveland, because I was like, oh, they haven't really blown me away much this offseason, but none of the AFC North teams have blown me away. I mean, the Ravens, they're
let's let Anthony get to that, because I imagine, that's the only team left to talk about. So he's going to talk about the Ravens, and I'm sure we'll have a discussion from that. So Anthony, cue you up.
Yeah, so I do have the Ravens as my loser.
There you go.
And that's because they started free agency by clearing cap room so they can afford their running quarterback, Lamar Jackson, who is asking for way too much in the grand scheme of things. Because if you use your franchise tag and spend all this money to sign your quarterback, you have no money left to get targets around him, to get receivers to pass to, tight ends to pass to, running backs to block, an offensive line. You don't have these guys. So you aren't doing much in free agency because you're trying to use all this money to sign your quarterback. I think that's going to make you lose. They were able to keep some special teams players, their long snapper, I can't remember his name, Justice Hill, Geno Stone,
the safety.
They were forced to cut Calais Campbell, and that's a big loss there. And I think that they're really shooting themselves in the foot.
They said that we're open for him to come back, and Campbell's like, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
Yikes.
It's not looking good over there. They really want to keep Lamar Jackson, but I think that's going to keep them in handcuffs.
I definitely agree. I think they're the loser amongst the rest of the AFC North. Not by a long shot, but I want to ask you guys, do you think the Ravens are winning against Lamar? So they called his bluff. We haven't heard anything about any teams anywhere close. They gave him the non-exclusive franchise tag, which, by the way, is like 11 or 12 million less per year than the exclusive franchise tag. So they're saving money on him, and allowed him to go out there and negotiate with other teams. And so far, unless there's something we don't know about, crickets. So while the Ravens may have lost in this division, how do we feel about the Ravens versus Lamar for the negotiation?
I'm going to quote American rapper Jay-Z.
I thought you were going to say, I quote the Raven nevermore. I thought we were going to kind of stick.
That would be fire.
That would have been, I set you up for that.
I screwed that one up. I screwed that one up. No, I'm going to quote American rapper Jay-Z. Nobody wins when the family feuds. I know that we're trying to find a winner in the Lamar and Ravens thing, but the winner is when it's over, everybody is the winner. And until then, everybody's the loser. This is very, very disappointing. I mean, you got a franchise quarterback like Lamar. You want to treat him like that. You want him to feel like a franchise quarterback. And I told you this before, Brian, but I hate when teams leave franchise quarterbacks out of coaching decisions, especially when it's offensive. Like, I'm really looking for the Ravens to start treating Lamar like the star quarterback that he is.
Well, let's go ahead and turn to the AFC East, Kevin. Go ahead and get started. Let's close out the American Football Conference and give us our winners and losers.
Let's do this. I'm stoked about this because obviously, I'm a Bills fan, and there's so much to talk about in the AFC East. I feel like it's been the busiest division, hands down, especially across the AFC. I'm going to follow in Brian's footsteps. I really liked the holistic approach to the division thing and then break it down from there. It kind of gives for a little bit more analysis on the spot across the board. So starting with my Buffalo Bills, it's very difficult to assess the Bills free agency period, given that the big loss that everybody was expecting was Jordan Poyer, and the big retention everybody was expecting was Tremaine Edmonds, and they flipped it. So we love keeping Poyer. I mean, Buffalo was undefeated when Jordan Poyer played last year until the Cincinnati game. That's just is what it is. Edmonds has always been this great, pterodactyl in the middle of the field who erases throws before they're made, which is something that I think a lot of people didn't know about Tremaine Edmonds, because he doesn't make a lot of flashy plays. He's not an interception guy. He's not a sack guy. He's not a turnover guy. Milano's always been more of the flashy guy, and the Bills extended Milano, which I love. But losing Edmonds, I think it's going to hurt about as much as people are thinking that it's going to hurt. I love the receivers that they brought in, Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy. I think they're both great depth pieces. They could help out Josh Allen, finally adding some speed to that offense. And I think we're going to see potentially...
They're not the number 2 that everybody's expecting them to get, though. We have to say that. They are not the number 2 opposite Diggs.
I'm hoping... I mean, I was looking at it today. Diggs, Davis, Shakir, Hardy, Sherfield is not the worst wide receiver room. I would love another name in there, and I'd love it to come from the draft. It's going to be hard to assess until we know, where they go in that direction. But that's the Bills. That's my thoughts on the Bills so far. As far as the Dolphins go, you have to love bringing in Jalen Ramsey. I've said before on the show that I think his play at times last year left a little bit to be desired, but you can't argue with his PFF grade. You can't argue with his, consistent ability to lock down other opposing teams' number 1 wide receivers. Now, I want to get in the weeds here a little bit because that's the kind of guy I am. I love the backup quarterback signing. Mike White is definitely going to be a little bit of Tua insurance.
Fits that offense, too. He knows from his time under Mike LaFleur's offense in the Jets, so not much of a learning curve.
Running it back with the running back room, love that. No pun intended there, but, we'll take it.
It just naturally comes out of you.
It just comes out. It's just, I'm a poet. What can I say? So it's really hard to argue with any of the moves that the Dolphins made. Bringing in David Long, Duke Riley as linebackers, that's definitely a solidification of that position group there.
Coached by Fangio, no less.
See, look at us, man. But those 2 teams so far, I got nothing bad to say other than the Edmonds loss, really. Patriots, I was thinking when I first got this prompt, I was like, oh, I think it's easy for me to pick my loser. It's going to be the Patriots. But James Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Gesicki, they've added 3 offensive linemen. None that are really
lost Myers. We got to say that. I don't. Juju is not a net positive there. He's at best a neutral.
I completely agree. I would even say a downgrade. They gave him the same freaking contract. He couldn't have just paid that to Myers.
Culture wise, you don't have Myers out there doing TikTok dances.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Myers was always a workman. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think the big play that cost them that game didn't hurt Jacoby Myers' stock in New England.
Wouldn't surprise me. Belichick seems like the type.
Yeah, that's
Juju didn't do that this year.
That's a game-losing
Juju didn't
play.
throw a touchdown pass to the other team and lose to my former pupil Josh McDaniels and the other. Yeah, no, I think that could be a factor.
Brutal. And they brought in Chris Board, Raekwon McMillan, Mac Wilson at linebacker. Nothing special there. Jonathan Jones is staying in town, which is good. 2-year, $20 million, maybe a little rich for his high level of play. I wouldn't say he's like an elite corner in my opinion, but bringing him back is solid. And then the Jets, I mean, can you really assess the Jets free agency period until we know what's happening with Aaron Rodgers?
I think we can assume he will be on the Jets.
If we're putting Aaron Rodgers on the Jets, yes. I'm comfortable doing that. I know there's been a holdup. They went out and they're checking the boxes on the wish list. They traded for safety Chuck Clark. So, the Jets, definitely another one. So if we're putting Rodgers on the Jets, now this is where my decisions come into play. So Anthony, could you please hit me with a little bit of winner music, please? I think you have to call the Jets winners if they get Aaron Rodgers. It would be hard. I mean, I was torn between them and the Dolphins. So I don't really necessarily know if we're putting Rodgers on the Jets, then going from Zach Wilson to Aaron Rodgers, I don't care if you do nothing else. You're a winner, especially given how competitive the Jets were down the stretch last season, given the horrible quarterback play. And they fell off a cliff. That can't be denied. Salah's got a lot to prove, and this is his year to do it. We've talked a lot about coordinators who are great coordinators, aren't always great head coaches. I think this is his chance to prove that he's a great head coach. Give him the great quarterback. I think Aaron Rodgers makes Garrett Wilson a top 10 fantasy option at wide receiver next year. Breece Hall's coming back. I love Breece Hall. So, and that's just, again, we're talking about what they're adding, not necessarily in a vacuum, but like from where they were to where they're going. I think the Jets are the clear winners. As far as the loser goes,
Hold on, you got to let us comment on the winner first.
yeah, please go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm
Yeah,
assuming everybody's going to agree. I love what the Dolphins have done. Don't get me wrong. But Rodgers to the Jets, they went from one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire NFL last year to a guy who's won the MVP, 3 or 4 times, won a Super Bowl, future Hall of Famer. Come on, that's insane. And they didn't lose any major pieces. They gained some pieces like Chuck Clark. I actually think Allen Lazard, even though it's tied to the Rodgers thing, is a nice upgrade at number 3. I like him better at this stage in his career than Corey Davis. So yeah, the Jets clear winners. I love how the Dolphins have done it. The Bills don't have a lot to do. Patriots, we'll let you hear about the losers. You guys have any comments on the winners for the AFC East?
No, all I was going to say is that Lazard is definitely a good 3, and that should not be understated. We've seen him as a 2, decent. We've seen him as a 1, not a 1, but I love his work ethic. As a 3, that's a really good 3.
Great run blocker, too. I got to say, though, he had that one viral thing where he blocked 3 Dolphins guys and then did the 1, 2, 3. Kudos for you, Lazard, on that.
If we call Lazard the 3, are we referring to Elijah Moore as the 2?
I guess you could have Lazard as a 2 and then Moore as like the slot guy, although I wouldn't be surprised if Moore is included in a trade back. I'm starting to think that might be.
Because I love Elijah Moore, but I just don't know how much. I think that the relationship may have soured too much at this point in New York. I mean, I hope not, because if Elijah Moore can put it together, then imagine that trio of Moore, Lazard, and Wilson. That might be one of the most ascendant, potentially top 10 wide receiving core in the league. Maybe even higher than 10. I don't know how high we want to go. I mean, because it's a trio there. That's a good 1, 2, 3 punch. So yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate that. That was a tricky one because I didn't know if you take Rodgers out. I obviously don't think they're the winners. I think they're arguably the losers.
But yeah, if they're still left with Zach Wilson and Mike White is gone, they're one of the losers of the entire NFL.
That would be brutal. It's too close and there's too much discussion and hullabaloo. I don't know if you can. I don't think you can say.
I'm counting it. I'm counting. I mean, he's not going back to the Packers. There's no other teams tied to them. He literally said he wants to play for the Jets. It's just a matter of time before they figure out compensation that works. It's best for everybody. It's best for the Packers to move on. It's best for the Jets to get the deal done. So I would be shocked if he's not on the Jets. So I'm happy to assume that he is for this exercise.
Yeah. So awesome. So then Anthony, why don't you hit me with a little. Now, this was difficult, right? Because I'm a huge Bills fan, and I was torn between the Bills and the Patriots. And I think talking through it with you guys and sort of working out the exercise and learning about where we were assessing where they've been to where they're going, I think you have to call the Patriots the losers of the division. Because, yes, the Bills lost Tremaine Edmonds, and the Patriots don't really have any notable losses, but the Bills don't have far to go to maintain their status as Super Bowl contenders. I think you slot in a Bobby Wagner or a high draft pick at linebacker, and I think they're right back where they were. You pair Wagner and Milano, you throw a young guy in there. They drafted Terrell Bernard last year to compete for the linebacker position. I'm not understating the loss of Tremaine Edmonds, but the Patriots have so far to go, in my opinion, to become contenders, especially if we're talking Super Bowl, that I don't think anything they did this year. I mean, the needle has moved forward for sure. It's hard not to love, Juju's okay, but I don't
think the needle's moved at all. Personally,
really?
I mean, I like Mike Gesicki, but that's not usually
adding is the big
tight ends that they were. Blocking tight ends are what they usually have gone for for the Patriots in the past. I like him as a weapon for Mac Jones, but he's never been a good inline blocker. He's essentially like a bigger wide receiver. I think the Jacoby to Juju thing makes zero sense. The exact same contract
horrible
for a guy who's a better route runner. Maybe Juju's got some run after catch ability, but he's never been a good number one. So you're still desperately needing a solid number one there. They haven't really made any upgrades over the offensive line, which was, at times a bit of a liability last year.
Yeah.
The defense is always going to be solid, but they still didn't do anything to address that. They just kind of leaving it the same and hope that it's okay. I think the Patriots are clear losers.
Comfortable calling them losers for sure.
All right, let's run it over to the NFC. Greg, we're going to start with you. NFC West, the defending Super Bowl champions from 2 seasons ago. Winners and losers.
Yeah, so Anthony, just hit me with the loser music. I mean, look, I think the obvious loser is probably the Cardinals because they haven't really done anything, and they PFF graded them the worst. But I would rather talk about the Rams than the Cardinals, so that's what I'm going to do here.
Yeah.
Here's the thing with the Rams. It's like they've spent less than every team in free agency, which is not surprising. They traded Jalen Ramsey. They lost Nick Scott, who signed with the Bengals. And let me be clear that when I say, even though they might be losers in this particular free agency, their strategy worked. They did everything they could to win a Super Bowl, and they did. And now this is the inevitable sacrifice of making all these moves in the past 3 to 4 years, and they're in a rebuild. So the question is, can they stay good amidst the rebuild? With a healthy Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald, it is certainly possible. I think this was just some inevitable Rams sacrifices that had to be made. The Cardinals, it's weird because they had such a sharp rise and fall, and now it's not a free agency destination. DeAndre Hopkins will probably be gone. Nobody wants to listen to me talk about the Cards for 5 minutes on the show, so that's just where I'm kind of at. Yeah.
Brutal, but true.
Yeah, I would not disagree with either of those teams as losers, so it's almost like they're both. We'll give the double loser for the Rams and the Cardinals. How about a winner out of the NFC West? There you go.
Good timing.
Yeah. So for a winner, I think between the Seahawks and 49ers, they've actually both done some positives, and we can maybe talk about both teams. You can't really fault either one. If I had to pick, I would probably go 49ers as the winner, and this is my reasoning for it. So they did lose some guys, right? They lost Mike McGlinchey, they lost Emmanuel Mosley, they lost Jimmy Ward. But the reason I'm picking them over the Seahawks is because it's hard to maintain a Super Bowl caliber roster for a long stretch of time. And even if you have a generational quarterback, that's not necessarily a given. And the 49ers still have that, especially if Brock Purdy's elbow heals according to plan. They got Javon Hargrave, and that was big for what's already an elite defense.
Huge. I mean, a lot of lists, he was the number one overall free agent, so that right away puts him in the mix.
Right. Tayshaun Gibson is back for another year. They still have their most important players. Sam Darnold, I wouldn't call a long-term solution, but if Brock Purdy isn't ready to go at the start of the season and Lance just isn't cutting it for Shanahan, then Darnold's like athletic enough to work in a really good offensive scheme. Quick little recap on the Seahawks. I mean, first of all, I'm super happy for Geno Smith. I don't see how anyone could not be at this point. They got Devin Bush. They got Draymond Jones. They got Julian Love. Losing Rashad Penny and Travis Homer, it's not terrible because you already have Kenneth Walker, who was lighting up the league in his rookie year. So is this a Super Bowl team? Doubtful, but they're worth taking seriously, which is something that nobody did 9 months ago. So I'm feeling net positive toward the Seahawks, but if I had to pick a winner, it would probably be San Francisco, who is still seen as one of the elite Super Bowl contenders going into next season.
Yeah, I mentioned briefly that Javon Hargrave right away, as good as Nick Bosa was, Defensive Player of the Year, he was one of the only consistent producers on that defensive line. So adding a guy like Hargrave up the middle, man, who you going to double team there? So I love that as a signing. And how I view Sam Darnold is not, I don't think he's going to have any starting time, but we just witnessed having to go to Christian McCaffrey in the NFC Championship game. You can bet the Niners have every intention to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster. And if you're going to have a third quarterback, why not have a guy who was picked in the top 3, who a lot of people thought could be a franchise star quarterback, and Sam Darnold? That's a luxury pick at quarterback. So I like what the Niners have done. Like what the Seahawks have done too. Signing Geno Smith to the deal they did, 3 years, $75 million. It's actually fairly flexible if for some reason he doesn't work out, but it rewards him for the year he had leading to the playoffs. Draymond Jones, that's a great signing. Yeah, same. I mean, you could argue Devin Bush kind of has underperformed relative as a first-round pick for the Steelers, but it just improves the offense. I like this all around. Nothing super splashy, but the Seahawks, after surprised everybody last year, they're only making more good decisions.
Do you guys think that they're going to showcase, the Niners are going to showcase Trey Lance in the Brock Purdy-less games and then trade him? Or do you guys think Like that's got to be the move, right? Like let Trey Lance go out there and cook a little bit. No,
we just talked about this. Go ahead, Greg.
If Kyle Shanahan thinks that Trey Lance has a better chance to win games than Sam Darnold, then yes. But if he's going to do it just for we put so much into this guy, or we traded this, or I want to give the kid a chance, that's not Kyle Shanahan. No.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Shanahan's not that type, huh?
This is a guy who went from Lance to Jimmy because Lance got injured and because they couldn't find a trade partner for Jimmy. That's what kept the bridge, and then he went out, and Brock Purdy came in, and then we talked about what happened in the NFC Championship game. Why would he trade away a quarterback with that kind of
just that
ability?
Asset allocation is just.
I don't think Shanahan cares about asset allocation.
Right. So right.
This is a team that's ready for the Super Bowl. They don't need to recoup assets. They need to make a run now, and why not have 2 first-round picks at quarterback? Yeah. And a Mr. Irrelevant who was on the brink of going to the Super Bowl. Why not keep all 3 just to recoup some assets? I don't think Shanahan cares about that at all.
I think you guys are so right. And I personally, if it's my team, I'm running it differently. But I think you guys are so right. There's no way Shanahan's going to do that. You're right.
I think they're scarred after what happened in the NFC Championship. I think they might put a 4th quarterback on that roster just to be safe.
That's funny.
All right, Anthony, the time has come. Let's hear you talk about, I think we all know where this one's going, but we'll cue it up for you anyway. Winners and losers from the NFC North.
All right, so I'm going to start with my loser because this is sweet music to my ears. I've been waiting a very long time to say the Green Bay Packers are losers. And not only did they lose Aaron Rodgers, but it goes deeper than that. They lost Alan Lazard to the Jets. They lost Robert Tonyan to the Bears. They lost Jaron Reed to the Seahawks, and they lost Dean Lowry to the Vikings. And that's 2 rivals right there, just to point that out. They're going to be playing against them now. They're losing everyone, and they're only gaining safety Tarvarius Moore and long snapper Matt Orchik. Like, I'm not sure if they know that they're supposed to be playing professional football. This isn't the practice squad, guys. If you're going to rebuild, then, dip into free agency, do what you need to do as an organization. I mean, the guys who own the Packers, they are very disappointed right now. All 3,000 of them.
I was going to say, this is like, stock certificates or whatever. I mean, they're a little hamstrung by the Rodgers thing, but you can say that that's kind of their fault. Like if they figured out terms with the Jets and they could move on and figure out where they need to allocate the cap space that they have, they're about to get a huge dead cap hit. I'm assuming none of us disagree with here because I'm with you there that I think the Packers are clear losers in the NFC North during free agency.
Disgusting. They might be the losers of the league.
I don't disagree, but I will say that for their mental health, it might be better. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is
definitely
freaking exhausting.
Yes.
And
get him out of there.
Yeah, and look, they know they missed their window. It's not that they think, we're going to go win the Super Bowl with Jordan Love now. But to your point, Brian, if they move this thing along and they kind of understand the assets that they have, then they can start at least building and try to give Jordan Love a chance in these next 2 to 4 year window that they have.
Yeah, getting rid of Rodgers doesn't make them a loser. Not having done it already makes them a loser.
And I think this is gets worse before it gets better type situation with Green Bay. I would have loved to have seen some Texans-esque signings, like trying to stay competitive, trying to grab some guys to see what you have in your rookie QB or your first year starting QB, but they're not really doing that. I mean, they're kind of just standing pat, and their offense or defense wasn't really good enough to be stood pat with, in my opinion. So yeah, we're going to need to see a huge trade haul. We're going to need to see a nice little draft and then hopefully a nice little post-draft free agency spree. But geez Louise, it is a slow start for the Packers offseason.
I mean, could this be like their 2023 season be a financial reset?
It could.
Of a better word.
I mean, I think it has to be.
It seems like they need to work in the draft, maybe lose out next season, and then start over again. Because I think Aaron Rodgers was just such a large investment for so many years that losing that, they're going to have to start picking up more investments just one by one in the next few years.
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to start over. They might actually finish last in the NFC North. That's my hot take of the day.
Super possible.
I think that they may finish last.
Yeah. I think they need to evaluate Jordan Love.
The Bears did this year.
True.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they evaluated Fields enough to decide that, okay, we're going to really try to build around this guy. I think that's the Packers' goal. 2023, like, see what you have in Jordan Love, see if it's worth keeping him and building around him, or if you're going to need to go back to the well at quarterback. They have had the luxury of back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks, so no matter what happens, I don't feel bad for them there.
Same.
All right, Kevin, I will close it out, so I will let you go next.
I have my winners still.
Oh, that's true.
That's
Here I
a
am
tough
trying
one,
to.
too.
That's his favorite. It's the whole reason he's on the show. He's decked out in Lions gear. Let's go, Anthony. I totally cut you short there. My bad.
It's all good. So for my winner, if this show was recorded on Saturday, it would have been the Chicago Bears. But then yesterday, news came out that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was signed. So I'm switching over to the Detroit Lions as my winner. So the Detroit Lions in free agency made some pretty crazy signings, mostly in the secondary. Gardner-Johnson he could play nickel, corner, and safety. He's very versatile in the secondary, and I think that's important for this crippled defense. Cornerback.
He's such a Dan Campbell guy, right? Just a guy who's like goes out there to fight.
Yeah. Fiery.
Yeah. Literally, he has gotten in fights before.
He's going to be a kneecap biter. He might be the first Lion to
actually literally do it. He'll literally do it.
Campbell's like, finally, somebody took me literally.
He posted up that on Instagram, and a Lions fan said, "For those of you who missed Jamal Williams, Cam Sutton has a cartoon character as his profile picture."
There you go.
He's an anime fan, so here we go.
Cam Sutton.
Cornerback Emmanuel Mosley also signed at cornerback, and then running back David Montgomery to replace Jamal Williams, which is one of the losses I think here. And offensive lineman Graham Glasgow, who just tweeted that he was bitter to join the Detroit Lions. He wanted to join the Lions so bad, and now he's here. The Lions lost to Sean Elliott, Jamal Williams, Evan Brown, and Chris Board, and I think losing them, but then getting who they signed, I think it almost not only evens out, but it's kind of an upgrade. And I think and then Gardner-Johnson brings such a veteran presence. So he brings kind of an experience to kind of coach the other guys this team's very young. The oldest guy on the team is Taylor Decker at 28 years old. So it's a very, very young team. And I think adding veterans is very important for that. The biggest hole, I think, in the free is backup quarterback position. They are solid with Jared Goff, but who's going to back up if he's ever hurt?
Anthony Richardson?
No.
Maybe, but I mean, they're not even be picking that early. I think Anthony Richardson is going to go to Carolina, honestly. I think that they have their eyes on him, but filling that backup position.
You think the Panthers are going to take Richardson 1 overall?
Hot take.
I actually think
Whoa.
so, yeah. I'm saying it right here on the podcast.
Sizzling. Hot take.
Do we have a hot take? Do we have a sizzle sound?
No, I don't.
Let's get one.
Oh, that's a crime.
There we go.
All right.
Oh, that's
not a sizzle.
So
that's the opposite of a sizzle. That's our pot of gold.
There we go. That's my hot take song.
I will say.
We need a fire though. Get like a steak sizzling.
Crackling.
Yeah.
I will say I think we'd be remiss not to give a shout out to the Bears free agency.
Good. I was gonna cue you up for that, Kevin. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, unbelievable what the Bears have done. I mean, you guys heard me already go on and on about Tremaine Edmonds, so I don't have to sell who they're getting there. But seeing that they picked up TJ Edwards as well, the haul that they got to move out of the first overall pick, 8 freaking spots. They're not picking 23rd. They're not picking 16th. They're picking 9th. And they picked up another future first. They picked up a second rounder this year. They picked up wide receiver DJ Moore, who I think profiles as Fields 1. Last time Greg was on the show, I crystal balled a Fields 1 trade. And it happened, and I'm stoked about that. So that's I gotta bang the drum for the Bears and what they've accomplished this free
TJ Edwards was one of the highest rated off-ball linebackers by PFF this year. He is now with the Chicago Bears. Yep. Dante Foreman was a solid running back when he was in. He now gets to be Thunder and Lightning along with Khalil Herbert. You mentioned DJ Moore. They added Nate Davis. That offensive line definitely needed an upgrade. Nate Davis isn't a stud, but he's a solid guard who used to play with the Titans. DeMarcus Walker, Travis Homer, nice little, change of pace. Tunyon, you mentioned him earlier, Anthony. I like these pieces. The draft is going to be a big deal for them to see who they hit in there, but an argument can definitely be made for Chicago or Detroit as
both
the winners.
Teams, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, now, Kevin, I'll cue you up.
Here we go.
NFC East, a winner and a loser from free agency.
Absolutely. I think I'll be a little bit more succinct with this one because I think it's pretty easy for me. I liked the holistic approach for the East because it was for the AFC East because it was pretty complicated for me. But this is a lot simpler in my opinion. My winner, Anthony, is going to have to be I was waiting for the noise, but it's cool. There we go. Okay. My winner is going to have to be the New York Giants. Personally, in my humble opinion, I think keeping their quarterback, you can say whatever you want to say about Daniel Jones, but the price on your guy is the price on your guy. And we've learned that time and time again in the league. Keeping Saquon Barkley. I love the Paris Campbell deal. They're running it back with Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton. Trading for tight end Darren Waller for what Brian called peanuts. Now, a third-round pick is maybe to me a little more than peanuts, maybe cashews or like seasoned almonds or something along those lines. But I absolutely love what the Giants have done in free agency. Bobby Okereke is great.
Okereke.
It's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I like what the Eagles have done. They would have been my runner-up as winners. Dallas hasn't exactly been still. But, I mean, outside of Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks, who are both...
Eagles have had a lot of losses. They've brought
Exactly.
some pieces,
Penny's
but they've had a lot of
cool,
losses.
But Sanders is on his way out of town. TJ Edwards is on his way out of town. Cool that they brought back their cornerback room and Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. Rashad Penny is interesting. But I think the Giants have done enough to be my winners, and I think the clear losers are the Washington Commanders because, any team that's running it back with Sam Howell as their QB, no disrespect at all to what he could be, but we don't know. And so,
I like the Brissett signing, though. I actually like. I mean, he's probably the strongest, believe it or not, of the like backup style or starter
100%.
kind of fringe starter guys of all the ones that were available. So if Howell doesn't work out and they don't find a way to get a quarterback, Brissett's not a bad guy there.
Agree more with you, but if we're talking about trying to be competitive for the playoffs and a championship, I still think Commanders with Brissett as their starter are the worst team in that division, honestly. Can
I bring up one point on the Commanders?
Please.
It's not a roster signing, but I do think there's something to be said for Eric Bieniemy being there now. They've always been a defensive-minded team.
Yep.
Rivera's a defensive guy. Del Rio, sometimes has his defense ready to go. Other times he just says stupid things and allows 31 points per game.
Does do that sometimes.
So I like the offensive mind at least.
Yeah. I don't think that, particularly their free agency has been bad. I mean, they brought back Deron Payne. F.A. Obata's fine. Cody Barton and David Mayo. Cam Dantzler and Danny Johnson. Just nobody special, really. Nobody to take them from being a bad team to less than a bad team.
Their defense was top 10 for a lot of the season last year, and they kept most of their pieces.
I guess time will tell, but I think as far as I'm concerned, does anybody think there's a different loser?
I mean, it's hard because I think all of these teams have done fairly well, but
Same.
Just for the amount of snaps that the Eagles have lost, I think you're going to have to throw them out. I know
throw a bone
that
their way.
they have a guy ready to replace, a second-year guy ready to replace Isaac Seumalo, but Samalu's been with the Eagles for 9 years.
Yeah.
He's a loss. You look at, they lost both of their starting safeties. Gardner-Johnson now gone. Marcus Epps gone. We can say what we want about the PFF grade, but he started for that defense, which is one of the best defenses in the NFL. TJ Edwards gone. Kazir White gone. Javon Hargrave in San Francisco. The guys they did brought back are the older grizzled vets like Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, which, hey, great. I mean, lifetime Eagle type guys,
right.
But these, I would have rather kept Javon Hargrave than
Honestly.
Brandon Graham at this stage in their careers. So,
And
they brought back
too, right?
No, Slay came back.
Slay's staying.
They were gonna release him, then they ended up renegotiating. Slay is back, Bradbury is back.
Picked up Rashad Penny. There was enough good.
But I don't actually. Penny is not much of an asset these days. He can't stay healthy. You can say what you want about how he finished last season, but he can't stay healthy. They like Gainwell. I think the Eagles are going to draft Bijan Robinson if he doesn't go prior to 10. So I don't think Penny does much. I think he's a depth piece.
I like Penny. I think Penny is a great signing for the Eagles. I think that's huge for them to have a back with that style.
He's
of running.
basically missed over 50% of the games, and he's been in the NFL now for 5 years.
The health is a huge thing, right? If health wasn't a variable, you have to agree that he's great, and that's a good
I love his talent. He was a first round pick.
Yes.
I love his talent. He
The
can't stay on the field, and the
mechanical
Eagles know that. They didn't bring him on to lead their backfield. They're gonna go. I guess I don't know for sure, but would not surprise me if Howie Roseman goes with a stud running back in Bijan with that number 10 overall pick.
Yeah, that's an interesting call.
Anything else in the NFC East, or we will wrap it up?
I think we're ready to roll.
Okay, so NFC South, going to do the holistic thing as we wrap up the show.
That.
Nice long show today. Armand, as far as I know, still hanging out in the chat.
He's the man.
So first, we'll talk about losers because it's interesting. There are 2 teams that I was considering for losers, and there are 2 teams that I was considering for winners. So I'd love to get your guys' takes. So we're going to start obviously on the loser side. Don't do the sound yet, because I'm going to break down the 2 teams and then tell you which one I picked as the loser. Then you can drop the sound. So first, let's start with the New Orleans Saints. So these are the teams I'm considering or considered. I already made my decision for loser. They added Derek Carr. I like Derek Carr. Maybe I'm higher on him than you guys. Upgrade over Andy Dalton for sure. Brought back Jameis Winston, interestingly, who I don't think should be starting, but that's a nice QB2 on a 1-year deal. Re-signed Michael Thomas. Everybody thought that he was out the door, and you can say what you want about with the injuries with him, sure. But they're going to be losing Alvin Kamara for at least a portion of the season. His trial is set for July. No other major additions. They're basically just bringing the band back. All the guys I mentioned were guys that were already on the team, except for Jamal Williams. That's a nice signing. But if Kamara gets injured, Williams, no offense, Anthony, is not the guy who's going to lead your team to the promised land. I don't think Carr is either, even with the pieces they have. So I'm not excited about the Saints. This is a team that was not a playoff team in the first year under Dennis Allen. Didn't really add a lot other than Carr, which, hey, it's a quarterback. Big spot. That's one of my considerations. The other team, Tampa Bay Bucks, another team that is basically just trying to bring the band back together. Now, granted, this band won a Super Bowl for them 3 seasons ago. Not a bad band, but we're now 3 years removed from that. So they brought back cornerback Jamel Dean. A lot of people thought he was going to be gone. Re-signed Levante David for 1 year, $7 million. Great deal, but he's definitely getting up there in age. Chase Edmonds is the running back. They released Fournette. Edmonds is, I'm hoping that's a luxury piece.
Probably sticking with Rashad White.
Other than that, no other major signings other than at quarterback. Baker Mayfield, 1 year max of $8.5 million, a base salary of $4 million to compete with Kyle Trask. So between those 2 teams, very little movement, basically just re-signing their own guys. But one did better at quarterback than the other. So because I like Derek Carr with the Saints over Baker Mayfield, I am picking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as my loser for the NFC South.
That's fair. I completely agree. Just not enough action,
Yeah.
You mentioned running it back, but we are getting to a point where we're quite removed from that Super Bowl, and you don't have Brady. Not it for me anymore. We
didn't even mention the fact that the reason they need a quarterback is because they lost the greatest of all time.
Right.
At the QB position. Huge drop. They won a division that was very bad. But these 2 teams that I was considering for winner are very much on the rise, and they can't sit back and hope that they can go 9-8 and eke into a playoff game only to get destroyed in the first round. So let's start with the Atlanta Falcons. Brought back Lorenzo Carter, nice depth piece, pretty solid edge rusher. Traded for Jonnu Smith. People questioned that move, but he's got ties to Arthur Smith. I like him as a second tight end option. Definitely more of an inline tight end than Kyle Pitts. You can flex Pitts out a lot more. You need weapons for whoever's going to be playing quarterback in that offense. Re-signed, actually extended guard Chris Lindstrom, one of the best guards in the NFL last year. Was not up to be re-signed, but I love that they restructured his contract, lock him in for 5 years. Brought in David Onyemata, which is just a nice, solid guy in the middle, former Saint. Jesse Bates, we talked about him leaving Cincinnati. Well, guess what? He is now the starting safety for the Atlanta Falcons. Re-signed tackle Caleb McGarry, that great offensive line, one of the best in the NFL last year. Brought everyone back. Taylor Heineke, I like. If you're not happy with Desmond Ridder and you don't find a way to get a better quarterback in the draft, or if Lamar is still an option,
Brissett level, like a nice little backup,
like just a notch behind there. He can help you win some games with a lot of other pieces there. Yeah. So I just really like what the Falcons did, top to bottom. And then let's go to the Carolina Panthers. The other safety from the Bengals, Von Bell, goes to Carolina. We talked about Adam Thielen earlier in the show. They also signed safety Julian Love off that Giants defense. Had a nice, strong year. Miles Sanders, we mentioned him in Philadelphia. He is now looking like he's RB1 in Carolina.
Love
Andy
that.
Dalton, backing up whoever that QB is that they draft. Dalton is about as good as it gets for bridge quarterbacks, and a very strong number 2. Hayden Hurst, more weapons. Yes, they got rid of DJ Moore, but they've got the number 1 overall pick. So at the very least, their quarterback situation is solved, at least in the short term. They know what they're doing there. And because of that, just like the losers, the quarterback is ultimately what moved the needle to pick the Carolina Panthers,
Nice.
Anthony, as my winner.
I agree.
Because as much as what I really love what Atlanta's done, and I could see them competing, until we know exactly what they're doing at quarterback, we don't know that Desmond Ridder is the answer, not even close. Taylor Heineke's nice, but he's not anybody's idea of a solution. But at least Carolina has the number 1 overall pick. They get their pick of the litter of these quarterbacks. That's why I went with the Panthers.
I couldn't agree more because I said this earlier, and I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face. You can't put a price on your guy. If they are who they are, if that's the person you want, then all of King Midas's silver is the right answer. That is the right price.
Isn't King Midas
I
have
think
gold?
that-
It's a dodgeball reference. I gotta bring. I'm staying with the film references. That's my thing.
Dive, dodge, duck,
Yes.
something, and
Yes.
dodge. There you go.
Dodge,
King Midas is
dive,
silver.
dip, duck, and
Dip.
dodge.
Dip was the one I
Yeah,
left
there
out.
we
That's
go.
right. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
I think that the Panthers are the winner for the quarterback reason, and I'm sorry to be boring to everybody and just agree with you two, but I will
That's
say
just
that
because I
think
made
the
such a good argument. That's how I like to
Solid.
think.
Brian is a genius, and I can't say
Oh,
no.
I like this. Greg gets back on the show now.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, sign the full contract.
Let's go.
What I was gonna say is I think that the Falcons did make this a pretty close race, though. Like
Nice.
it's a really tight race because I think that roster-wise, the Falcons are actually not bad. Arthur Smith does have an identity to win, which is run the ball down your throat. I mean, look what they did to Cleveland last year. That was hilarious. This team beat the 49ers at home, so they're not terrible. AJ Terrell is a really good player.
Stud.
And I don't want to be mean, guys, but like no one's going to take your team seriously when Marcus Mariota is your
True.
quarterback. So
Yeah.
because Desmond Ridder is a big question mark, that is why I think we put them behind in the race.
Yeah.
However, I think that roster-wise, you can compare a lot between the Falcons and the Panthers. Young players who are good, teams that are capable of competing, and they clearly have some flaws and holes, but I wouldn't say they're bad. You know, maybe they're more of the they're kind of on the good bad team end. I don't think I could say they're a bad good team yet.
For now.
We are going to do, closer to the start of the season, a season predictions episode where we will
wait.
go through and predict how these teams are going to have. We'll have a much better idea of who the Falcons QB is at that point. I'm looking forward to this division in particular because of these two teams. And because the other two teams who have been fighting for the NFC South crown for so many years between the Saints and the Bucs are going in the opposite direction. So I'm looking forward to see what develops here. Guys, that's it. We've covered all the divisions.
Awesome.
We've got winners. We've got losers. Any last thoughts before we wrap up today's show, which is past an hour and 20 minutes at this point? No, good. We covered it all. I should hope so with that amount of time. Thank you to our producer, Anthony, for stepping up from behind the scenes, still doing the sound drops, doing double duty.
Always happy to.
And I got to always give you credit, Anthony, the notes. You updated the signings for all
go.
32 teams during free agency. He is going above and beyond. That's why we keep him on the show. Thank you to Greg Silver. Always great to have you on. Make sure to check out Screaming from the Sidelines, his basketball podcast for you basketball fans out there on the Believe Network. And Kevin, you're always doing your thing.
Appreciate it. You too.
But it's nice to thank you anyways.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. We are here every Monday and Friday. If you're watching, listening, whatever, for the first time, like, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. Don't forget to sign up for the Legit Football newsletter for free. This has been the Legit Football NFL podcast, guys. We'll see you Friday.